3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time we followed the offshore money through Epstein's private banking networks. Today we're pulling something out of the evidence room that was hiding in plain sight Epstein's art collection, and how the art world became one more tool for moving money and buying legitimacy. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So when the FBI executed a search warrant at 9 East 71st Street in July 2019, agents cataloged the contents room by room, and among the items they found was a painting of Bill Clinton wearing a blue dress and red heels hanging in a hallway of a 7-story townhouse valued at $77 million.
It is a striking image, and the media, they rightfully latched onto it. It became a symbol of this bizarre world that Jeffrey Epstein built around himself.
Of course, it's impossible to ignore.
But from a forensic perspective, we have to look past the sensationalism of it. We really have to. We need to strip away that tabloid element and view that painting and the busts, the sketches, the loose diamonds they found, and the safe as entries on a very specific kind of balance sheet.
Okay, so not just decor.
Not at all. What we are doing today is essentially an audit of Jeffrey Epstein's tangible assets. We're looking at how physical objects, art, collectibles, precious stones functioned as a secondary financial system, one that operated completely parallel to his banking networks.
And it isn't just about what was hanging on the walls. It's much deeper than that.
Much deeper.
It's about how these assets were valued, or, in some really critical cases, how they were not valued at all.
Right.
And how they were used to move capital across borders, especially when the traditional banking channels were frozen. So we're going to be looking at the physical inventory seized by the FBI.
Yes, and the valuation battles during the bail hearings.
And then the liquidation of these assets by the estate after Epstein's death. Because when you peel back the layers here, you start to realize that for a man like Epstein, a painting was never just a painting.
No, it was a check payable to the bearer, provided you knew where to cash it.
Exactly. So to understand the mechanics of this, we have to start with the physical reality, where these items were actually kept.
We have to go to 9 East 71st Street. This is the property that's described in the FBI agent affidavit. The case number is 19 Agan 6573.
This is the mansion, the subject premises, as it's called in the federal document.
Correct. The affidavit describes it as a nearly 19,000 square foot multi-story residence. And at the time of the raid, July 2019, the property itself was valued at approximately $77 million.
And the ownership structure was already a red flag.
It was owned by Maple Inc., a Virgin Islands entity. So right away you have this layered ownership structure. But the warrant wasn't just for the building. It wasn't just for the people inside.
It was for what was locked away.
Precisely. The warrant included, and I'm quoting the affidavit here, all locked and closed containers found therein.
That phrase, locked and closed containers, it sounds like standard FBI boilerplate.
It is.
But in this context, in this house, it turned out to be the absolute key to understanding how Epstein organized his entire life.
It did. When you look at the evidence list, and specifically we're looking at the document labeled Epstein Evidence-List.pdf, you start to see what all locked and closed containers actually yielded.
And it wasn't just files.
No. It was a catalog of a life that was compartmentalized into boxes and safes and hard drives.
The inventory itself is categorized under the 1B series in that evidence log.
Yes, that's the physical evidence log. And when you analyze this list, you see a really disturbing mix of high-value trophies and the actual tools of his abuse.
It disrupts the whole idea that this was just some wealthy man's collection.
Completely. A curator looks at a collection and they see themes. Impressionism, maybe modernism, sculpture. An auditor looks at this list and sees an operational inventory.
So let's walk through some of those specific items. The juxtaposition is jarring.
It is. Item 1B25 is listed as one box containing 2 white in color busts of female torsos.
Okay, and right next to that in the log, item 1B24.
One box containing 1 brown bust sculpture of female breasts.
And it continues. Item 1B18.
1 blue in color bust of a female torso. Now you should note the descriptions here.
They're very plain.
Extremely. These aren't described with artist names. There's no provenance noted in the police logs. The agents didn't write Rodin study or Grecian replica.
They described them physically
as body parts.
Yeah.
Their torsos, breasts. And Crucially, they were in boxes,
That's a detail that gets overlooked. They weren't all on display. Some of the stuff was packed away.
which implies mobility, or perhaps they were being rotated. But it creates a definite pattern. You have the painting of Clinton in the dress, which we know was hanging in a hallway.
Acting as this bizarre power signal to anyone who visited.
Right. But then you have these boxed-up sculptures of female anatomy, and then interspersed with these, quote, art objects, you find item 1B13.
One box containing four framed photos of naked females.
That is the crossover point. That is where the art collection bleeds directly into the trophy room.
It's the same inventory.
Precisely. A traditional fine art collector does not typically store framed photos of naked females in the same inventory sequence as busts and sculptures. Not unless the purpose of the collection is something other than, aesthetic appreciation.
It suggests that to Epstein, the marble bust and the photograph of a victim were in the same category.
They were possessions. They were visual representations of his dominance.
And we know from the reports these weren't just random photos. Item 1B20 is listed as
one baker's box containing bundled photos and CDs from Women Old Photos box.
And then there's 1B143.
A CD, labeled, literally, Girl Pics Nude Book 4.
Book 4.
The labeling, Book 4, implies a series. It implies a volume. It suggests a systematic documentation. This aligns perfectly with what we know of the Black Book of Contacts.
This was a black book of targets.
Yes, but from a purely asset perspective, the most revealing items might be the ones that seem the most out of place in a $77 million mansion.
You're talking about the massage tables.
I am. Item 1B11. One green massage table, PBPD 051024. The evidence list also notes a beige table, a brown table.
These were the centerpieces of the abuse.
And they're cataloged right alongside the high-value decor. And then there is item 1B27.
Which is?
One box containing one stuffed dog.
A stuffed dog. It's almost surreal.
It creates a sort of tableau of a predator who kept everything. But if we are looking for the financial mechanism here, the flight capital, we have to look past the clutter of the rooms.
We have to look at what was in the safe.
Exactly. We have the government's letter to Judge Berman, dated July 18th, 2019. This was shortly after the bail hearing. The FBI had cracked the safe in the townhouse.
And this is absolutely critical for understanding Epstein's liquidity.
It is. Inside that safe, they found more than $70,000 in cash. But more importantly, they found 48 loose diamond stones.
Loose stones, not jewelry, not set in rings or necklaces, just the rocks themselves.
Ranging from 1 carat to 2.38 carats, plus one large diamond ring. Now, you have to ask yourself, why keep loose diamonds in a safe in Manhattan?
Why not a bank's safe deposit box? Why not set them in jewelry?
Portability.
That's the only answer.
It has to be. Think about the physics of flight capital. Cash is heavy. $1 million in $100 bills weighs about 22 pounds. It requires a briefcase. It's bulky.
It also triggers customs dogs that are trained to smell the ink.
And it has serial numbers that can be traced. What about gold? Gold is incredibly heavy, and it sets off metal detectors immediately.
But diamonds?
Diamonds are carbon. They don't set off metal detectors. You could carry $5 million, maybe $10 million in high-grade diamonds in a matchbox in your pocket.
You could sew them into the lining of a jacket.
They are the ultimate currency for someone who anticipates needing to leave a jurisdiction immediately and permanently.
So finding loose diamonds isn't like finding a fancy watch collection.
No, absolutely not. A watch collection is for vanity. Loose diamonds are for survival. They are a recognized currency anywhere in the world. You can land in a country where your bank accounts are completely frozen, walk into a dealer, and walk out with local currency.
This connects directly to the bail arguments. We'll get to those in a minute. But just finding these loose diamonds and $70,000 in cash, it strongly suggests he was prepared to run.
It suggests he had a go-bag strategy built directly into his asset portfolio. The art on the walls, that was for legitimacy and for wealth storage, which is harder to move.
But the cash and diamonds in the safe were for mobility.
It shows a layered approach to risk management. He had different tiers of assets for different purposes.
Which brings us to the valuation of all this. Because when Epstein was arrested, he had to tell the court what he was worth. And that disclosure, or really the lack thereof, is fascinating.
This takes us to the bail memorandum. We are looking at the asset summary submitted by his defense team on July 12, 2019.
They listed his total assets at $559,120,954, over $500 million. It's just a staggering number to look at on paper.
It is, but forensic auditors, we always look for what isn't there. And if you look at the source document, it's EFTA 0000797.pdf, which is the probate petition. There's a specific line item that stands out like a neon sign.
And that line item reads,
Fine arts, antiques, collectibles, valuables, and other personal property.
and the value listed next to it.
TBD, subject to appraisal valuation.
TBD. To be determined.
Correct.
In a $500 million disclosure where he's listing equities down to the cent, the entire category of fine arts is just left blank.
This is a massive forensic red flag. You cannot have a $77 million house in Manhattan and an $8.6 million apartment in Paris and a private island and have TBD worth of contents inside them.
It's impossible.
The contents of those properties, the rugs, the paintings, the sculptures, the antiques, they would almost certainly be valued in the tens of millions of dollars, minimum.
So why leave it as TBD? Is it just, laziness on the part of the lawyers?
It's opacity.
Yeah.
It's a strategic move. Art is notoriously difficult to value quickly, which gives you plausible deniability in a court filing. If you say the art is worth $50 million, the court sees $50 million in liquid assets.
Yeah.
If you say TBD, it's just an abstract concept. It creates a black hole in the financial snapshot. It allows the defense to say, well, we don't know the value yet, while the defendant knows exactly what he can sell it for on the private market.
And the prosecution jumped all over this. The government's detention memo from July 8, 2019 argues that Epstein's wealth was not just vast, but extremely liquid.
They argued he was an extreme flight risk. They saw the chaos in the asset disclosure as a deliberate smokescreen. The defense tried to counter this. They offered to pledge the Manhattan mansion as collateral.
They said, look, here's a $77 million house. We'll put this up as bond. He can't run if his house is the guarantee.
It sounds reasonable on the surface, but the government rebutted that immediately.
How?
They cited 18 U.S.C. Section 1594, forfeiture. This is a crucial legal concept here. The government argued that because the mansion was used to facilitate the crimes, sex trafficking, it was subject to seizure by the government anyway.
So essentially they were saying, you can't offer us the house as collateral because we're already in the process of taking the house.
Exactly. You cannot use property that you are about to lose as a guarantee for your release. From the court's perspective, it has zero collateral value. It completely destroyed the defense's argument that the property anchored him to New York.
So the house is worthless as collateral. What about the jet? The defense also offered up the private jet.
The government was ready for that too. They pointed out that Epstein had recently sold a second plane. This proved he could liquidate heavy machinery, very expensive machinery, quickly and quietly.
Pledging one jet is meaningless if you have the resources to just buy another one or charter a flight.
It highlighted his operational agility. The government also noted his ties to what they called Institution One, showing more than $10 million in annual income. They called his assets unexplained.
Unexplained assets is the key phrase there.
It is. When you have income that doesn't match your visible business operations, and you have a safe full of loose diamonds, and a portfolio of art that's listed as TBD, you are looking at a system that is designed for evasion.
The art and collectibles were part of this broader strategy then, holding wealth in forms that are difficult to freeze.
You can freeze a bank account with a keystroke from a federal office. You cannot freeze a painting hanging in a Paris apartment quite so easily.
And speaking of Paris, let's talk about what happened after he died, because the estate had to deal with all this TBD property. And this is where we see the art actually being used as a form of currency.
This is the third block of our analysis, the estate. And for this, we're looking at the Epstein estate emails file.
The executors of the estate are Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn. Their job was to manage the assets.
Dissipation, or preservation. It really depends on who you ask. The U.S. Virgin Islands government was watching them like a hawk, accusing them of draining the estate to pay themselves and their lawyers.
There were liens on everything. The estate was effectively cash poor because all the liquid accounts were locked down.
But the legal bills don't stop. The electricity bills for multiple mansions, the security, the upkeep, that doesn't stop.
And there's an email that shows exactly how they handled this. It's from Mark Weinstein, the estate's counsel, to Carol Jacobs at the USVI government. The date is December 16th, 2021. So this is more than 2 years after Epstein's death.
The email discusses a request for a lien release. The estate needed money to operate in the U.S. But then you look at the paragraph regarding the Paris property. Weinstein writes, and I'm quoting, "Please note that as a result of the sale of certain Pritchney artwork in Paris for a total of $144,819.53, The estate has sufficient funds in the account in Paris to cover operational expenses in Paris during this period.
Preetney artwork.
We don't have an itemized list of what Preetney refers to specifically. It could be a collection name, an artist, even a location reference. But the mechanism is what's so important here. They sold art in Paris to generate about 145,000 euros.
And the email explicitly states they used that money to cover operational expenses in Paris, so they wouldn't have to ask for a lien release for that specific jurisdiction.
This is the proof of concept. The art was a secondary battery. When the main power lines, the U.S. bank accounts, were subject to strict oversight and lien releases, the estate could simply take a painting off the wall in Paris, sell it at a local auction, and fund their French operations for months.
It completely bypassed the need for U.S. banking approvals.
Precisely. If they had asked for, say, $160,000 to be transferred from the U.S. estate account to their account in Paris, the USVI government might have said no. They might have asked for detailed justifications.
But by liquidating the asset in situ, they self-funded.
They turned a decoration into liquidity without ever having that money cross a U.S. monitored border.
But holding on to the rest of this art wasn't cheap. If you weren't selling it, you have to store it securely.
No, and that cost, it gives us a hint at the scale of what we don't see. There's another email, dated December 23, 2021. This was from Carmen Scott from Motley Rice. She represents the victims writing to Mark Weinstein. She questions a request for $52,000.
$52,000 for what?
For storage of fine art.
For one period.
For one period. $52,000. That is a significant storage bill. That is not a U-Haul storage unit down the street. That is climate-controlled, high-security, professional art storage. Bonded warehouses.
And Carmen Scott asks the obvious question.
She does. She writes, please provide an update as to the marketing efforts for the sale of the art being stored.
The implication is clear. Why are we spending over $50,000 to store this stuff? Sell it, liquidate it, put the money in the victims fund.
Exactly. The fact that the storage costs were so high suggests the collection was valued well into the millions, despite that initial TBD status we saw back in 2019. You don't pay $52,000 to store posters. You pay that to store assets that are appreciating, or at least holding significant value.
The USVI government accused the executors of dissipating assets. In the USVI v. Indike response document, we see the estate's defense.
And they argue that the value of the estate dropped 75%, not because of their improper spending, but because of taxes. $180 million in taxes, and the Victim Compensation Fund, which was around $150 million.
Which is a valid argument. Those are massive, unavoidable numbers.
They are. But the opacity of the art assets remained a constant point of friction. The email chains show the victims' lawyers asking again and again, what is this art? Where is it? Why aren't you selling it faster?
And the estate is selling it piecemeal, like that Paris transaction, just to keep the lights on. It confirms the art was a reserve fund.
It was their operational slush fund.
So we have the physical assets from the raid, we have the valuation gains from the bail hearing, we have liquidation from the estate emails. Now let's talk about the mechanism. How did he buy all this stuff in the first place, and why art?
This brings us to the core of the strategy, the mechanism. For this, we need to look at the financial records, the EFTA files, and really understand the regulatory environment of the art market at the time.
Before 2020, the art market was, well, it was different.
It was a regulatory blind spot. It was, the Wild West. Pre-2020, art dealers in the United States were not subject to the Bank Secrecy Act in the same way that banks were.
They weren't required to file suspicious activity reports or SARs.
That's the key. So if you walked into a bank with $5 million in cash, they would have to report it immediately. KYC, know your customer rules apply. The bank has to know who you are and where that money came from.
And if you try to structure the deposits to hide it, breaking it into smaller amounts, that's a federal crime in itself.
Correct. But if you walked into a gallery or an auction house and bought a painting for $5 million using an offshore LLC, silence. No report. No questions asked.
It was one of the last unregulated financial asset classes.
And Epstein knew this. We can see the contrast so clearly in the financial logs. If you look at document EFTA 0001471t.pdf, this shows detailed wire logs from his banking institutions. Every single wire leaves a trail. It's traceable. It's reportable.
But an art transaction doesn't necessarily leave that same kind of trail.
Especially if you use the Freeport system. This is where the international aspect of his operations becomes so critical.
Can you explain that for our listeners? What exactly is a Freeport?
A Freeport is a high-security storage facility, like a warehouse, that's located in a tax-free zone. Think Geneva, Singapore, even Delaware in the U.S.
So how does it work?
You buy a painting at an auction in London, It gets shipped directly to the Freeport in Geneva. It sits in a climate-controlled crate. You then sell that painting to another investor in, say, Hong Kong. The title of ownership changes hands. The money moves between banks. But the painting itself never leaves the crate. It never clears customs.
So it never incurs VAT or sales tax.
And the transaction is private. There's no public record. It's a phantom asset. It exists physically, but legally it's in this sort of transactional limbo.
This connects perfectly with Epstein's international footprint.
Perfectly. He had the Paris residence. He had that fraudulent Austrian passport. He had a residence in Saudi Arabia listed on that passport. He was moving in jurisdictions where this kind of asset mobility is standard practice for the ultra-wealthy. You can move millions of dollars of value across borders by simply transferring the title of a crate sitting in Geneva.
And we see patterns of large cash movements in the EFTA files that would support this kind of liquidity.
Look at document EFT 0000007 ordinance and 0097.pdf. You see financial logs and receipts. You see large cash withdrawals. But then you also see these incredibly mundane receipts, like one for a peach message table from the Palm Beach Police Department forms.
A receipt for what, $55 to $57?
Something like that. It seems trivial. But you have to contrast that $57 receipt with the $70,000 in cash sitting in his safe, or the millions of dollars in wire transfers. The EFTA accounts, the Epstein Financial Trust accounts, they were used to facilitate purchases that could skirt the edges of AML flags.
AML being anti-money laundering.
Correct. Standard banks have algorithms that are designed to catch structuring, that's breaking up large deposits to avoid reporting thresholds. But if you are buying physical assets like art or diamonds, you are converting traceable cash into untraceable value. Once you hold the diamond, the paper trail effectively stops.
So the art on the walls, it was never just about impressing people. It was a functional part of the financial machine.
It served a dual purpose, and this is the synthesis. This is where we need to connect all these dots to see the full operational picture.
Okay, let's pull this all together.
Jeffrey Epstein did not just collect art. He accumulated portable wealth. Think about the pattern, the three-step process we've established today.
Step 1, acquisition.
Using opaque funds. The EFTA records show the cash flow. Buying assets in a market that, at the time, didn't ask questions. Using offshore LLCs to mask who the ultimate beneficiary was.
Step 2, storage.
Hiding in plain sight. The Clinton painting in the hallway of the mansion. The busts of female torsos packed away in boxes. Or locked in professional high-security storage that cost $52,000 a year to maintain.
And it was distributed storage.
Distributed, some in New York, some in Paris, some in the Virgin Islands, maybe some in a Freeport in Geneva. We just don't have the documentation for that last part.
And then, step 3, liquidation.
Selling items to fund operations whenever his primary accounts were frozen or under scrutiny. The Paris Prytanny sale is the textbook example. €144,000 generated instantly to keep the Paris apartment running. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to.
We can't ignore the legitimacy factor in all this, though.
No, we can't. We know from the source Clinton Epstein lorded-tail.pdf that he was hosting scientists, politicians, world leaders at that mansion. The townhouse was a stage.
And the art was the set dressing.
It was. It was designed to say, I'm a man of culture. I am a man of immense wealth and taste. It normalized him. It gave him a veneer of respectability.
But the painting of Clinton in the dress, that's a very strange way to impress people.
It's not about impressing them. It's a power move. It's a form of leverage. It signals, I know things. I can openly mock powerful people in my own home, and they will still come to my dinner parties.
It connects back to the CD found in the evidence.
The Girl Picks Nude Book 4 CD. The art and the blackmail material were two sides of the same coin. They were both assets. They were both forms of currency that he traded on. One bought legitimacy, the other bought silence.
The FBI raid ripped the curtain off that stage.
It did. When they opened that safe, they didn't find a stack of stock certificates or bond documents. They found cash and loose diamonds. When they looked at the walls, they found assets that could be sold in Paris with no oversight.
The TBD valuation in the probate filing, then, wasn't an accident. It wasn't an oversight.
It was a feature, not a bug. It was an asset class that is designed to be difficult to quantify and easy to move.
So when we look at that official $559 million total estate value,
we have to wonder what the real number was. How much value was locked up in that TBD? How much was stored in Freeports that we'll never know about? How many loose diamonds were in pockets or other safes instead of the one the FBI found?
The $52,000 storage fee strongly suggests there was a lot more than just what was hanging on the walls of 71st Street.
It suggests a warehouse of assets, a hidden portfolio. And we only know about the ones they found or the ones the estate was forced to admit to selling to cover their own expenses.
We know about the diamonds in the safe. We know about the $144,000 art sale in Paris. But the full inventory of the TBD's assets remains buried in the probate files.
And that is the difficult reality of tangible assets. They don't leave a digital footprint until you sell them. And if you sell them privately, they might not leave a footprint at all.
Next time on the Epstein Files.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.